They were falling apart in real time. Two couples, one band, and a recording studio that became the most expensive therapy session in music history.
When the rain washes you clean, you'll know.
What they created in the middle of that wreckage was Rumours, the album that turned Heartbreak into the best-selling record of an entire generation. 1. The band before the storm. To understand what Rumours cost, you first have to understand what Fleetwood Mac was before the storm arrived.
Stevie was writing songs, basically dialogues to me. I was basically writing dialogue.
By 1974, the band had already survived more turbulence than most groups experience in an entire career. Mick Fleetwood and John McVie had been the rhythmic backbone of the group since its formation in London in 1967. Building a reputation as one of the tightest and most instinctively connected rhythm sections in British rock. Christine Perfect, who had married John McVie in 1968 and taken his name, had joined the band as keyboardist and vocalist in 1970, adding a warmth and melodic sophistication that gradually shifted the group's identity away from its blues origins towards something more accessible and more emotionally complex. The band had endured the departure of founder Peter Green, the mental collapse of guitarist Jeremy Spencer, and a string of lineup changes that would have destroyed a less resilient organization. They had survived all of it. Then in 1974, Mick Fleetwood traveled to California to find a new guitarist and came back with two people who would change everything. Lindsey Buckingham was a gifted and fiercely ambitious musician whose perfectionism bordered on obsession. Stevie Nicks was his girlfriend, a songwriter of extraordinary instinct whose voice seemed to carry weather systems inside it. They arrived as a package, two people whose romantic and creative lives were so completely intertwined that separating one from the other seemed unthinkable.
You know, she basically is living her professional life, and so maybe, I don't know if that played.
It was unthinkable until it wasn't. Two couples, one collision. The cracks appeared almost simultaneously, which in retrospect felt less like coincidence and more like the universe making a point. By late 1975, as the band settled into the California lifestyle that success had made possible, both relationships at the center of Fleetwood Mac began quietly, and then, not so quietly, to come apart. John and Christine McVie, married for 7 years, found that the pressures of sharing a band with your spouse while navigating the excesses of rock stardom,
Fleetwood Mac, and said, this would be my last tour, and I'm going to move to Kent,
had gradually eroded whatever foundation their marriage had been built on. The dissolution was not explosive. It was the slower and in many ways more painful kind. Two people realizing with increasing clarity that the life they had built together no longer felt like theirs. Christine has spoken in interviews about the particular loneliness of ending a marriage while being professionally obligated to spend every working hour in the same room as the person you were leaving, across the band.
Fortunately, our relationship hasn't suffered. In fact, we're better friends now than we were when we were married.
Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were experiencing something considerably more volatile. Their relationship had begun in high school and had survived years of shared poverty and shared ambition.
And we spent a lot of really nice quality time. I've known Stevie since I was in high school.
The kind of bond that forms when two people decide together that they will make it regardless of what the world tells them. That shared history made the ending more complicated and more painful than a simpler relationship might have been. By the time the band entered the studio to begin recording what would become Rumours, both couples were in various stages of collapse. Mick Fleetwood's marriage to Jenny Boyd was also dissolving in the background, adding a third layer of personal devastation to an already extraordinary situation. 5 people walked into that studio carrying the wreckage of their personal lives and were somehow expected to make music together. 3. The studio as a confessional. Record Plant Studios in Sausalito, California became something that recording studios are not designed to be. It became a confessional, a courtroom, and an emotional battlefield simultaneously. a space where 5 people processed their most private devastations in real time while attempting to construct something commercially viable from the ruins. The sessions for Rumours began in early 1976 and continued for almost a year, a period of extraordinary creative productivity that was matched at every step by an equally extraordinary level of personal chaos. Engineers and producers Ken Kalat and Richard Dashut have both spoken at length about the atmosphere in the studio during those months, describing an environment where the emotional temperature could shift from collaborative warmth to devastating confrontation within the space of a single afternoon. Songs were written about the people sitting across the room. Lyrics were crafted with surgical precision to wound specific individuals who would then be asked to perform backing vocals on the tracks that described them. Stevie Nicks has recalled the particular difficulty of singing harmonies on Go Your Own Way. Lindsey Buckingham's furious and explicit account of their relationship's collapse
in our eyes, because we loved our band and we thought our band was great, and so we were like horrified that we had to fire.
A song that contained descriptions of her behavior that she found deeply unfair and deeply painful. She sang it anyway because the album required it and because she understood instinctively that what they were building together was larger than any individual grievance. The cocaine consumption during the Rumours sessions has become legendary, a chemical response to circumstances that were genuinely unbearable. But beneath the excess and the dysfunction, something remarkable was happening. 5 people in the middle of the worst periods of their lives were somehow producing their best work, which suggested that the relationship between suffering and creativity was considerably more direct than anyone was entirely comfortable acknowledging. 4. Lindsey and Stevie. Love turned to war. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks had been together for nearly a decade when Rumours began taking shape, and the history between them gave every song that emerged from their breakdown a weight and a specificity that purely fictional songwriting could never have achieved. Go Your Own Way was Buckingham's opening statement, a ferocious and rhythmically aggressive track that described Nicks in terms that left very little room for ambiguity.
How can I, when you won't take it from me?
The lyric accused her of wanting to give away love freely to everyone except him, a characterization that Nicks disputed publicly and privately for decades afterward. She has described the experience of hearing the completed track for the first time as one of the most painful moments of the entire recording process. And yet the song was undeniably great, driven by one of Mick Fleetwood's finest drumming performances and a guitar arrangement of such controlled fury that the anger inside it felt completely physical. Nicks responded with Dreams, written in a single sitting on a keyboard set up in the studio's rehearsal space, while the rest of the band worked around her.
When the rain washes you clean, you'll know.
Where Buckingham's response to the breakdown was fury, Nicks's was something quieter and more devastating, a song of calm and almost detached sadness that somehow landed harder than his rage. Dreams became the album's only #1 single, which felt like a verdict the charts were delivering on behalf of the universe. The two of them were required to perform these songs together every night on tour, to stand on stage and deliver their most intimate wounds to arenas full of people who had no idea they were watching something real. That tension never fully resolved. It simply became part of the music. If this story is moving something inside you, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so we can keep telling the stories behind the greatest albums ever made. Let's keep going. 5. John and Christine, The Quiet Devastation. If Lindsey and Stevie's breakdown was a storm, John and Christine McVie's was a tide, slower and less dramatic, but no less complete in its erosion of everything that had once held them together. Christine's response to the collapse of her marriage was to write songs of such melodic beauty.
It worked for me and John for 7 years, and it took us a good 2 years to get over that.
And such careful emotional restraint that their sadness only became fully apparent on repeated listening. Don't Stop, the album's most optimistic track, was addressed directly to John, an act of generosity so remarkable given the circumstances that it reframes the entire song once you understand its origin.
If your life was bad to you, just think what.
She was telling the man she was divorcing to look forward rather than back, to find hope in what was coming rather than grief in what was ending. That Christine McVie could locate that kind of generosity in the middle of her own heartbreak said everything about who she was as a person and as an artist. You Make Loving Fun was written about her affair with the band's lighting director, a relationship she kept secret from John during the recording process, adding another layer of complexity to an already extraordinarily tangled emotional landscape. John McVie responded to all of it with characteristic silence. He was not a songwriter, which meant he had no equivalent outlet for what he was experiencing, no way to place his grief inside a melody and send it out into the world. His contribution was to play bass with the same precision and the same quiet authority he had always brought to the band, which was its own kind of emotional statement. Some people write their pain down. Some people simply show up and play. 6. The album that shouldn't have existed. By any reasonable measure, Rumours should not exist. The circumstances surrounding its creation were so personally destructive and so professionally precarious that a lesser band would have collapsed entirely before a single track was completed. The fact that it not only exists but stands as one of the greatest albums in the history of recorded music is a testament to something that defies straightforward explanation. Rumours was released in February of 1977 and entered the Billboard chart at number 1. A position it held for 31 weeks. It sold over 40 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling albums in history. It won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year. It produced 4 top 10 singles. It remained on the Billboard chart for over 2 years. The numbers are almost meaningless in their scale, so large that they stop communicating anything specific about what the album actually was and what it actually meant to the people who heard it. What the numbers cannot capture is the quality of the listening experience, the way the album moves between emotional registers with a fluidity that makes it feel less like a collection of songs and more like a sustained piece of emotional architecture. Every track earns its place. Every performance is committed and precise. The production by Ken Kayla and Richard Dashut was warm and detailed, without ever drawing attention to itself, creating a sonic environment in which the songs could breathe and the performances could land with their full emotional weight. Rumours was an album that should have been impossible. The fact that it was also perfect remains one of the most remarkable achievements in popular music. 7. What Rumours left behind. Nearly 5 decades after its release, Rumours continues to find new listeners with the same ease it found its original audience, which suggests that what it captured was not specific to its moment, but universal to the human experience of loving someone and losing them. The album returned to the charts in 2020 when a viral social media moment introduced it to a generation born long after its original release, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. Young listeners who had never heard it before responded to it exactly as their parents and grandparents had, with the particular recognition of hearing something that articulates a feeling you thought was exclusively your own. That is the true measure of Rumours' achievement. It took the most private and most painful experiences of 5 specific people in a specific studio in California in 1976 and transformed them into something so universal that the specifics became almost irrelevant. What remained was the feeling itself, the ache of a love ending, the strange mixture of grief and relief that accompanies the collapse of something that once meant everything. Fleetwood Mac went on to record more albums, experience more lineup changes, and accumulate more commercial success, but Rumours remained the moment that defined them, the album that everyone came back to eventually. Christine McVie returned to the band in 2014 after a long absence, and Mick Fleetwood has spoken about the album with a reverence that suggests even its creators understand They made something that transcended their intentions. Two couples fell apart in a recording studio and accidentally made a masterpiece. The heartbreak was real. The music was forever. They walked into that studio broken and walked out with rumors. It cost them everything and gave the world one of the greatest albums ever made. Some records are just music. This one was a whole life lived out loud. Subscribe to the channel and we'll see you in the next one.